Karen Whitmore pressed her face against her living room window, binoculars trembling in her manicured hands as she watched the Hispanic woman across the street fumble with what appeared to be a new deadbolt. Without hesitation, she snatched her phone and dialed 911. "This is an emergency," Karen declared, her voice pitched with righteous authority. "There's a suspicious person breaking into 247 Maple Grove Drive. She's definitely not the homeowner. I know everyone in this neighborhood." The dispatcher's calm voice crackled through the speaker. "Ma'am, can you describe what you're seeing?" "A woman, probably in her 30s, dark hair, clearly Hispanic. She's been at that door for 10 minutes trying to get in. The real owners are a nice white couple, the Johnsons. This is obviously a break-in." Karen had been the self-appointed guardian of Willowbrook Estates for 3 years, ever since her husband's promotion had allowed them to move into the upscale development. As the HOA board president, she considered herself the neighborhood's first line of defense against declining property values and undesirable elements. "Officers are en route, ma'am. Please stay inside and observe from a safe distance." Karen smiled triumphantly. Another crisis averted. She prevented countless disasters over the years, stopping teenagers from skateboarding on the pristine sidewalks, reporting residents who left their garbage cans out an hour too long, and ensuring every lawn met the strict HOA standards. This break-in attempt would be her crowning achievement. She watched as 2 patrol cars pulled up, their red and blue lights painting the manicured lawns in dramatic colors. The officers approached the woman, who was now standing beside a moving truck Karen hadn't noticed before. "Excuse me, ma'am," Officer Rodriguez called out. "We received a report about suspicious activity." The woman turned, and Karen's stomach dropped. She was holding a set of keys and what looked like official documents. "Oh, thank goodness you're here. I'm Maria Santos Johnson. My husband and I just bought this house, and I'm trying to change the locks before we move our things in." The realtor said it was standard practice. Officer Rodriguez examined the paperwork, deed, mortgage documents, and a letter from the realtor. "Everything looks legitimate here, Mrs. Santos Johnson. Someone called 911 thinking you were breaking in." Maria's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "Someone called the police on me for changing the locks on my own house?" Karen's binoculars clattered to the floor. Santos Johnson. The woman was married to Tom Johnson, the software engineer who'd lived there for 2 years. She'd assumed he was single because she'd never seen a wife. Her mind raced. How had she missed this? She prided herself on knowing every detail about her neighbors. The officers spent 20 minutes apologizing to Maria while Karen watched in growing horror from her window. This wasn't just embarrassing, it was potentially catastrophic. Making false 911 calls, racially profiling new residents. The HOA board would have questions. The homeowners would have questions. As the police cars drove away, Maria Santos Johnson looked directly at Karen's house. Their eyes met through the window, and Karen saw something that made her blood run cold. Recognition. Maria knew exactly who had called. Karen's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Your new neighbor." The HOA meeting room buzzed with unusual energy. Word had spread about the incident at the Santos Johnson house, and attendance was double the normal size. Karen sat at the head table, her hands clasped tightly to stop them from shaking. She'd spent the entire night weighing her options, and every scenario ended in disaster. Maria entered precisely at 7 p.m., commanding immediate attention. She brought a leather portfolio and positioned herself in the front row, directly in Karen's line of sight. Tom Johnson sat beside her, along with several other neighbors Karen recognized as her previous enforcement targets. "Before we begin tonight's agenda," Karen announced, her voice barely steady, "I have an important announcement to make." The room fell silent. Karen could feel dozens of eyes on her, waiting. She looked at Maria, who nodded almost imperceptibly, a final reminder of what was at stake. "Effective immediately, I'm resigning from my position as HOA board president and from the board entirely." The words felt like swallowing glass. "I believe it's time for new leadership and fresh perspectives in our community." The room erupted. Shocked murmurs filled the space as neighbors turned to each other, seeking explanations. Karen had been the iron-fisted ruler of Willowbrook Estates for 3 years. Her sudden resignation was unprecedented. Furthermore, Karen continued, each word harder than the last. I want to apologize to Maria Santos Johnson and her family for yesterday's incident. My actions were inappropriate and based on unfounded assumptions. I take full responsibility. Maria stood gracefully. Thank you for that apology, Karen. I accept it, and I hope it marks the beginning of positive changes in our community. She turned to address the room. I'm Maria Santos Johnson, and my husband Tom and I are excited to be part of this neighborhood. I'm a federal prosecutor, and I'm interested in ensuring our HOA operates fairly and legally for all residents. The implication wasn't lost on anyone. Karen watched as the power dynamics in the room shifted visibly. Board members who had rubber-stamped her decisions for years suddenly looked uncomfortable. Neighbors who had been on the receiving end of her enforcement sat up straighter, sensing opportunity for change. I'd like to nominate myself for the vacant board position, Maria continued, and I propose we conduct a full review of our HOA policies to ensure they comply with federal fair housing laws. The motion was seconded immediately, and the vote was unanimous. Karen gathered her papers with trembling hands. As she prepared to leave, Mrs. Chen, an elderly resident she'd cited multiple times for non-conforming garden decorations, approached. Karen, Mrs. Chen said quietly, I hope you learn from this. You're not a bad person, but you let fear make you do bad things. The unexpected kindness broke something inside Karen. She'd spent years building walls between herself and her neighbors, enforcing arbitrary rules to maintain control. Now, stripped of her authority, she saw the community differently, not as a territory to protect, but as people she'd systematically alienated. I'm sorry, Karen whispered. I'm so sorry. Mrs. Chen patted her arm gently. Sorry is a start. What you do next is what matters. As Karen walked to her car, she passed the Santos Johnson house. The moving truck was gone, replaced by a beautiful garden that somehow managed to be both elegant and warmly welcoming. Maria was watering newly planted flowers, still in her business suit but with dirt on her hands. Their eyes met across the street. Maria didn't wave or smile, but she nodded, a gesture that seemed to say the first chapter was closed, but the story was far from over. Karen drove home to her immaculate house, wondering for the first time if perfection might be lonelier than she'd ever imagined. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from other HOA board members, 3 voicemails from neighbors demanding explanations, and 1 text from her husband. Heard about the meeting. We need to talk when I get home. As she sat in her silent living room, Karen realized that losing her position might have been the easy part. The real challenge would be figuring out who she was without the power to control everyone around her. Outside her window, the neighborhood looked exactly the same as it had that morning. But Karen knew everything had changed, and there was no going back. Her phone buzzed one final time. A message from an unknown number. The Tuesday Book Club is looking for new members. You're welcome to join if you're interested in learning about different perspectives. Your neighbor, Mrs. Patel. Karen stared at the message for a long time, wondering if redemption might be possible after all. Karen spent the next hour pacing her marble foyer, rehearsing explanations that sounded increasingly hollow. She'd built her reputation on being the neighborhood's protector, the one who maintained standards and property values. Now she faced the possibility of being exposed as something far worse. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 p.m. Maria Santos Johnson stood on Karen's pristine doorstep, no longer wearing the casual clothes from earlier. She changed into a sharp business suit that screamed professional authority. Her dark eyes held a mixture of controlled anger and calculated assessment. Mrs. Whitmore, I believe we have something to discuss. Karen's throat felt dry. I'm not sure what you mean. Perhaps there's been some misunderstanding. The misunderstanding was when you assumed I was a criminal because of how I look. Maria's voice was steady, but Karen could hear the steel beneath it. I'm a federal prosecutor, Mrs. Whitmore. I specialize in civil rights violations and hate crimes. I know exactly what happened today. The words hit Karen like a physical blow. a federal prosecutor, in her neighborhood, married to Tom Johnson, who she now remembered worked for a defense contractor with government clearance. This wasn't just any new neighbor. This was someone with the power to destroy her life. "I think you should come in," Karen managed, stepping aside. Maria entered the immaculate living room, her eyes taking in the expensive furnishings and the wall of HOA achievement certificates. "Impressive setup. I can see why you'd want to protect it." "Look, there was clearly a miscommunication today. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood." "From what?" "A woman changing locks on her own property." Maria settled into Karen's white leather sofa without invitation. "I've done some research on you, Karen. May I call you Karen? I've reviewed 3 years of HOA meeting minutes, complaint reports, and incident logs. There's a pattern here." Karen's carefully constructed world began to crumble. What kind of pattern? Selective enforcement. The Martinez family got fined for their children's bicycles being visible from the street. The Patels received violation notices for their cultural holiday decorations. The Washingtons were cited for their son's basketball hoop, which was identical to the one the Hendersons have in their driveway. Maria pulled out a tablet, scrolling through documents. But somehow, the White families never seemed to face the same scrutiny. "That's not. I don't see color. I enforce the rules equally for everyone." Maria's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Today you called 911 on a homeowner for the crime of existing while Hispanic. That's not equal enforcement, Karen. That's harassment based on racial profiling." Karen sank into her chair, the weight of her actions finally settling in. She'd always told herself she was protecting property values, maintaining standards. But looking at Maria's evidence, seeing the pattern laid out so clearly, she couldn't deny the truth any longer. "What do you want?" Karen whispered. "I want change. Real change." Maria leaned forward, her prosecutorial instincts taking over. "You have 2 choices. You can resign from the HOA board immediately, and we can handle this quietly within the community, or I can file a federal civil rights complaint, and we can let the courts decide whether your actions constitute a pattern of discriminatory harassment." Karen's mind raced. Resignation would mean losing everything she'd built, all her authority and status. But a federal complaint would mean public humiliation, possible legal consequences, and definitely the end of her standing in the community. "I need time to think." "You have until tomorrow's HOA meeting. Announce your resignation, or I announce my complaint." Maria stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Karen, I'll be attending that meeting as a homeowner. I'm looking forward to getting involved in community affairs." As the door closed behind Maria, Karen collapsed into her chair. For the first time in years, she wasn't the one in control. The hunter had become the hunted, and her predator was far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Tom Johnson. "Heard you met my wife. She's pretty amazing, isn't she? Looking forward to working together on neighborhood improvements." Karen stared at the message, realizing that her ordeal was just beginning.